Thank you. Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Kristen Kosi. I am an Extension Assistant Professor for Utah State University out in Box Elder County. And I'm going to be presenting with Dr. Jessica Schott today on mental health in Utah's coal country, and then we'll leave you with some closing remarks and a call to action. So I want to give so for this presentation, it's going to be a little more data-driven than some of the other ones that we've heard, but I think very useful as well. So I just want to give a brief, really quick background on mental health in Utah and in Carbon County specifically. So by some measures, Utah has the poorest mental health of all states for adults. About 1 in 5 Utah adults experience poor mental health, and 1 in 20 experience a serious mental illness such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. 33.8% of adults reported alcohol misuse, and from 2019 to 2022, 19.9 drug deaths were reported per 100,000 people in the population. Despite these statistics, over half of Utah adults with mental illness did not receive mental health treatment as of 2019, and suicide is the second leading cause of death for those ages 10 to 24. So narrowing in on Carbon County more specifically, in 2023, 28% of Carbon County adults reported 7 or more days of poor mental health in the past 30 days, and this is greater than a percentage for the state. From 2019 to 2022, 23 deaths by suicide were reported per 100,000 people in the population in Carbon County. And from 2019 to 2022, in the Carbon-Emery-Grand County area, 34.2 drug deaths were reported per 100,000 population. So that's just a brief overview of what mental health looks like in Utah and in Carbon County. Now I'll give an outline of the presentation. So I'm going to start by talking about mental health in Carbon County and Bryce. We are in the heart of coal country, so I think it's only right to discuss it. And so I'll go into coal mining and mental health, and then I'll look at mental health stigma and discuss some stigma reduction and solutions for addressing mental health. And then I'll pass the presentation over to Dr. Schott, and she'll talk about the power of connection and leave us with some closing remarks and a call to action. So for my dissertation in 2022, I had the pleasure of coming to Carbon County and staying here for a month. And I conducted interviews with folks here in the area. I conducted 27 interviews in Bryce and Carbon County in 2022. I talked to 6 active or retired coal miners, 6 directly related to a coal miner, such as like a spouse or a child or a parent. I talked to 5 mental health care providers, 4 community leaders, 3 who work in substance use recovery, treatment, and prevention, and then others who just worked in retail or secretarial positions and things like that, local business owners. Interviews lasted approximately an hour, and I conducted them either in person or via Zoom based on the person's preference. Most of them were in person here in Bryce. So first I'll talk a little bit about the results from general mental health in Carbon County and Bryce. So I asked interviewees, do you view mental health as a key issue in the community? And 24 or 88.9% said yes, specifically in our community, we view mental health as a key issue. And then 3 folks said, yes, we see it as an issue here in this community, but we see it in every community. And then I asked, what sort of mental health issues would you say exist in the community? And folks said depression, that was the top mentioned one. Others were anxiety, substance use disorder, bipolar disorder, suicide, and schizophrenia. And then I posed the question, well, why do you think that mental health issues exist here? And the top response was job insecurity, economic uncertainty, and lack of work in relation to coal mining. A couple of others were rurality and lack of recreational opportunities and this sort of old school way of thinking, but I'm going to focus just on the top response for the purposes of this presentation. So in terms of job insecurity, economic uncertainty, and lack of work related to coal mining, I'll just provide a few examples from some interviewees. So one interviewee said, in terms of job insecurity, a lot of our guys are in the coal mines. So when those coal mines shut down, they get depressed. They get anxious. They have $400,000 houses, $200,000 in cars. So people get depressed, people get anxious. And I think that's a big thing. And so this just sort of touches on like what happens if I don't have a job, or if we don't have a job tomorrow or a month from now or a year from now, and what that looks like. In terms of economic uncertainty, one individual said, I think that economic uncertainty probably plays more of a role in mental health here because of the unstable nature of the coal mines. And this touches a little bit more on just the overall economic uncertainty in terms of like the booms and busts that happen in the coal mining industry, like where sometimes it's just booming and business is booming and the industry is going well, and then other times there's a dip and folks sometimes lose their jobs and the coal mines close down. And so this kind of gets at that economic uncertainty more broadly. And then in terms of lack of work, one individual said, lack of work. People go to the coal mine, an 18-year-old kid, you've been there for a year, you get married, have kids, and then you get laid off a year later. And you can't get back to work. That's going to depress anybody. I've seen people that just really struggle with that. And so that was just a general question, and people brought up coal mining in that general question, but I also asked questions specifically about coal mining and mental health. I think it's important to note that mental health experiences are very unique, and they happen in context. And so one of the reasons that I did my dissertation research here is I was looking at how does natural resource dependency affect mental health and those who work in natural resource dependent industries. And so I wanted to look at an extractive industry and say, okay, how does coal mining affect mental health? I also went to Summit County and I looked at how the tourism and recreation industries affected mental health. But I asked questions specifically about coal mining and mental health because that context, the context in which people are experiencing mental health concerns, all happen within this sort of industry that is so dominant in this area. So first, I just asked folks to tell me about the relationship between the community and mining. And some answers included coal mining is the core of Carbon and Emory counties. That's why we exist. Coal and the railroad is what built this area. Coal is what brought the immigrants here. Coal is what brought the jobs here, the diverse culture. Without coal, we wouldn't have Carbon County. You're either a miner, somebody that works on the miner stuff, or somebody that feeds or supports the miners. All the way down the line, it's the mining community that keeps us going. It's part of who we are. It's a wonderful heritage. It takes a special type of individual to be able to go that far underground every day and get dirty and work hard and put your body through that every day. There's a lot of pride in being able to say, hey, we built Utah on our backs. We love it. And I think that the mines have really brought everybody close together. Sometimes I think maybe to an outsider, we can talk a language that maybe they don't even understand. Sure. So I asked after that, how do you believe that mining impacts mental health? And one of the main ways that individuals said they believe that mining impacts mental health is through physical injury or the risk of physical bodily injury. So for example, one individual said, I think it does wear on people. It's hard work. There's possibilities of injuries. I do think that some of the coal miners struggle with depression. Another individual said there are 100 ways to get hurt, from riding in on the little trains to mine collapses. The face has pressure and sometimes they'll collapse. Sometimes they'll shoot and throw coal, and the coal can hit people who are walking by and can break bones. It's hard on you mentally to know that you may not come out of a coal mine that day, or you might be taken out in an ambulance in real possibilities. Another individual said these young kids, they invest all of their physical health into their jobs, and they get to be in their 40s, and they can no longer perform or do the same work that they used to. And there's only so many higher level positions in coal mining for people. So I think not being able to perform or have the physical health to do what you used to do, I think that contributes. The expectation is completely and totally unrealistic from these coal mining places about what an older person is capable of. And so there's a lot of shame and guilt when these people can't provide for their families like they used to. When I specifically asked about coal mining and mental health, job insecurity came up again. One individual said, "You never know where you're going to have a job tomorrow. Lila Canyon here in Price is on fire right now." When I was here doing the research, Lila Canyon was on fire. And so they said, "Lila Canyon here in Price is on fire right now." So all those guys that work there are out of work. And so a lot of those guys have the house payments, the car payments, feeding their families. So being out of work and not being able to do any of that sure puts some extra stress, and I'm sure the depression too on those men. When we see a coal mine shut down, we see a huge increase in substance use disorder and mental health because that's how they're coping. They're going to cope, and there's a lot of substance use underground too. Another individual said, "There's nothing in this area that will support your lifestyle if you're a coal miner and you lose a coal mining job. You can't go from being a coal miner to work anywhere else in town and still have your vehicle and still have your house and still be able to make those payments. If you're going to start being a coal miner, you better plan on it for the rest of your life, because once you get those bills that only coal mining will support, you will have to be a coal miner." So that feeling of being stuck in the coal mines, I'm sure, weighs heavy. A couple of other ways that folks said they believe that mining impacts mental health is through shift work and job pride. So for example, for shift work, one individual said, definitely shift work, that's the biggest impact. When you become a coal miner, you don't just get stuck on one schedule for the rest of your life. What they end up doing is they'll work you 3 days on during the day, and then you'll get 4 days off, and then you go 3 or 4 days on at nighttime, so you can completely switch your sleeping pattern. I get coal miners coming in and they're like, "I don't know, your age," talking about me, my age. And they're like, "I think I have some sort of brain issue." And then you start investigating their sleep patterns, and the answer is you have sleep deprivation. And in terms of job pride, this almost seems like, how would this have a negative connotation if you're so proud of your job? But this example shows how. So this individual says, "My father-in-law's a miner. He loves it and he hates it. It's just dark and dangerous. And being in a dark and dangerous place is not good for your mental health. But they also love their job, and they're so proud of it that when they suddenly can't, whether they get laid off or they get injured, I think that's very detrimental because they put so much value in their craft. I think it's hard for people when that's all they've ever done and all they've ever known, and then suddenly their mind closes and now they don't know what to do. That leads to a lot of depression and anxiety and things like that. Just the job itself could be hard on mental health, but also on the other side, they find so much fulfillment in it. So when they can't do it, then it's a hard thing. After we talked about that, I asked, do you believe community members who work in the mining industry experience more mental health issues than folks who may work in other industries? And the resounding answer was yes. There were a few folks that said no and a few that said, I don't know. But many said yes. So I'm going to give a few examples. This individual said, yeah, when you picture a coal miner, I usually picture like this big, rough and tough guy, right? That's not always the case. But I think that you're in an environment where we don't talk about mental health and we don't talk about feelings. We don't talk about vulnerability and we don't talk about struggles. So you see a lot of untreated mental health or undiagnosed mental health because they probably don't feel comfortable reaching out to anyone about it because they'll get better tomorrow. Or they'll just keep working out to get their serotonin and dopamine going. Or they don't have time because they're working crazy shifts or crazy hours. Or they're on a long haul where they're not getting a day off for who knows how long, so there's definitely a connection. Another individual says it's higher stress, it's a higher demand. Your hours are always long, your shifts are always changing. There's a lot that weighs in heavy on that. But I also kind of think that there's more hidden mental health, more people not willing to talk about it. The last thing in the world you want to do in a coal mine is bring up, I was just kind of feeling sad today. Another individual said, I think being underground, being on crazy work schedules, being on a long haul for 45 days without a day off, working through the night, I definitely can see that triggering more anxiety and depression and having a hard time, stabilizing your moods. Because it's so difficult to get into a healthy routine when you're doing those kinds of things, on top of it being an incredibly hard physical labor job. A couple more. This individual said, it does take more of a toll on you. You could be going along and all of a sudden, a wall blows out. And the next thing you know, your buddy is thrown up against the wall and, dead. Things can change like that in an instant. So it's very mentally stressful. Another individual said, the majority of the people that end their lives are in our mining industry. The mass majority of the people who have ended their lives are coal miners. It's just, that's the community. So that brought me to mental health stigma and how folks feel about telling others about their mental health concerns and just how folks perceive stigma in the community here. So one individual said people are so worried that people will know that they're depressed or that they're going to therapy or that they're going to couples therapy or that they have a substance use disorder. They don't seek treatment because of it because it's such a small community. I think that stigma keeps people really sick. Another individual said, I think that people feel specifically in this community, they feel unseen and unheard because for so long, issues like mental health or substance use have always been put on the back burner, or it's uncomfortable, or it's shameful, and so we brush it under the rug and we don't talk about it. But I think that's created a lot of stigma for people to not feel comfortable to come forward and ask for help. Another individual said, I think overall you're considered weak if you have mental health issues. There's this idea out there that you're not special in any way. You're just like everybody else. We all have problems. Figure it out.
Yeah.
And so I asked, how would you describe how people with mental illness feel about telling others? And the general consensus in the area is that people don't tell others. So for example, one individual said, we don't air our dirty laundry. We keep it in the family. There's a weakness to needing that help or seeking that help, so we don't talk about it. Another individual said, most people that I know in their heart of hearts believe that their mental health problems are just a sign of how they're a weak individual. So that keeps us from talking about it and keeps us from seeking help. And then a couple of people mentioned how there's more secrecy among certain groups in the community. And one of those groups mentioned was coal miners. So for example, this individual says, this might sound stupid, but again, small town, we recognize people's vehicles. We know that Johnny, that's a pseudonym, driving that jacked up diesel truck, he's a miner down at Skyline, and now he's parked in front of Four Corners. What's he doing? Or, he has to go see a counselor. So there's a kind of secrecy to it for some demographics. When I asked, what do you believe are some barriers that may prevent community members from accessing mental health services? One of the top mentioned barriers, along with the cost and lack of insurance, was stigma. 33.3% or 9 individuals said that they believe that stigma is a barrier that may prevent community members from accessing mental health services. So that brings up the thought of stigma reduction and solutions for addressing mental health. And one thing I did ask was, what do you see as needed solutions for addressing mental health issues in the community? And the most mentioned solution was having more conversations about mental health and more community outreach. One individual said, I would like to see the city talk about it. Our mayor, our chamber of commerce, our city council, let's talk about these things. Let's really get support out into the community and not just say we support it. Let's go boots on the ground and see where we can help. And another individual said, everybody's really good at saying that they're supportive of these things, but then you don't see many people actually doing anything about it. Like, get uncomfortable, learn something new, and see how you can interact with someone that is maybe having a mental health crisis. And you can provide support to them and just help people feel a little bit less alone. I think when it comes to stigma reduction, I always say that one of the most important things to start chipping away at that stigma is to start having open conversations about mental health and mental health concerns in the area. And I was in a QPR training yesterday with Amanda, and something just like sparked with me, because I always say this, I always say that more conversations about mental health are key to chipping away at that stigma, because if we're not talking about it, we're keeping it sort of taboo and to ourselves. And in that QPR training, Amanda mentioned something, and I think that it applies here, that we need to be having conversations about mental health to reduce that stigma, but we need to be having the right conversations and using the right language. And some of the other presenters today talked about using the right language when we're talking about mental health, because that could either identify you as a safe person to come to and to talk to about your mental health concerns or about suicidal ideation or anything like that. Or it could put someone totally off and be like, oh, I can't come talk to that person. Somebody presenting today said, using the word committed suicide, right? That has a negative connotation. And if you're using that type of language, someone might not feel safe to come talk to you or open up to you about those mental health concerns that they're having. I think it goes as well with mental health. Like I try to stray away from saying like mental health issues because that has a negative connotation to me. I say mental health concerns or mental illnesses, something that doesn't have that sort of charged language that could identify me as a sane person for someone to come talk to and can create an environment that's safe for someone to feel like they can open up in. So having the conversations is important, but I think the way we talk about it and the language that we use when we're having the conversations is just as important. Some other strategies for reducing mental health stigma in communities could be raising awareness and providing education. So providing accurate information and education about mental health can help dispel myths and misunderstandings about them. There's training and advocacy. So implementing mental health training programs or workshops for workers, employers, employees, students can increase awareness and start those conversations and help chip away at that stigma. There's community-based initiatives. So communities and community-based organizations can create mental health awareness programs, peer support networks, and anti-stigma campaigns. And then supporting peer-led programs. So peer support groups provide safe spaces for people to share experience and even reduce some internalized stigma. Okay, now I'll turn it over to Dr. Jessica Schad, and she'll talk about the power of connection and leave us with some closing remarks. Okay.